Hi there, everybody. I'm PTDevil, and welcome to the third episode of Fill in the Blank. If you're wondering why this is the third episode when there's only one other episode on the channel, well, shame on you for not going to watch the other episode on Zach's channel. If you haven't seen it already, there's the thing. Speaking of Zach, he should be dropping in momentarily. And 3, 2, 1... Mixing it up a little today, aren't we? Yes, well, trans-dimensional vaudeville gags aside, let's just jump straight into the meat with this one because, trust me, we have got a lot to cover in this episode.
Josh, give me 10 seconds here, okay? I need to put myself back together.
No time, sorry, so let's just jump straight into it this time with The Rising of the Shield Hero. The Rising of the Shield Hero debuted in early 2012 as a light novel. It was written by Aniko Usagi, who was at the time a relatively unknown figure in the literary circle. It was originally self-published on a user-generated novel site, but once it gained popularity, it was picked up by Media Factory with an expanded storyline and illustrations by Seira Minami. Not long after that, it soon spawned an anime adaptation that was equally well received to the point where it was greenlit for a second and even third season shortly before the first one was even finished. God, I wish they did that with other animes. The anime did receive some backlash when it was localized to North America, but we'll come back to that later. For now, we need to stick to the format of the show and review it as a show in order to see if the bookends of this story make sense on their own.
Hang on.
Okay, what?
Something about the user-generated in the comment section, those two just don't bode well exactly for what's to come.
As of right now, we need to do our jobs first and synopsisize this thing, so let's get into the review now while we still have a few functioning brain cells left.
Wait, I thought there were no functioning brain cells in Otaku.
We start off with a nice scene overlooking a cliff by the sea, with a man and a little girl exchanging a look over a ball before our protagonist wakes up from what I'm sure is just a normal dream. No foreshadowing here, just keep moving on.
Putting aside the fact for the moment that this foreshadow replicates the exposition might break the trope meter in the first 20 seconds of this review, I'm simply gonna ask, why does the main character look exactly like a 22-year-old version of me?
Look, I'm really not sure that this is the character you want to pull a Gidget the Taco Bell Chihuahua on.
What?
So anyway, this is Naofumi Iwatani, a rare breed of otaku in that he actually goes out of his home and interacts with society. He takes a casual trip to the local library to check out some of the light novels when he's suddenly hit with the plot. And when I say hit with the plot, I mean he's literally hit with the plot.
And my efforts to stop the trope meter from exploding just got stabbed like Julius. Number 1. Random chance of finding a magical book or object or coin coincidentally falling on the protagonist's head, about as coincidentally as a fish swims in water. Don't go anywhere. Trouble alert number 2. Everything was normal until... Seriously, a dark and stormy night looks like an Oscar, comparatively speaking.
Well, get used to it. These are all so baked heavily into the isekai stories that it would take an incredibly well-written story to try and debunk them at this point.
Sure. Heroes. Level 1 generic information search. Keyword, isekai. Begin retrieval. Decode. Royal fantasy. Interesting. Wait, okay, I have to ask, does every single manga in existence in this world already have its own subcategory?
I mean, we're still comfortably in the isekai boom as of now, so I'd say that's more on you, but we're digressing too much
sorry,
already.
That's on me. So he finds information on these 4 cardinal weapons, but before he can understand what that means, or go to another otaku research manual, this happens. Sorry, film geek, get used to it if you're not already. But it's actually kind of on point, in my opinion, because now Fumi just fell through heaven and hell to wake up in a backstage of a Frank Zappa reunion tour?
Oh, we were just trying to summon Satan. What are you kids doing here? This can't possibly be some kind of omen, could it?
You know, I was going to go into this long spiel about how this crossing the threshold event this early is very weird in the generic hero cycle, but then I remembered that Isekai doesn't care, so I think we should just move on.
So yeah, Naofumi ends up getting isekai'd along with 3 other guys and discovers that he is one of the 4 cardinal heroes, each equipped with the exact legendary weapons mentioned in the book, What Are the Odds?
And the super helpful response of why they're in the break room for Orichalco Shunoros?
It doesn't help that the other 3 are having none of it themselves as they immediately start demanding respect and payment up front instead of asking a few basic questions first.
It's not like asking any of these snobs for a measured or even civil response is going to do anyone much good, so the better chances are just give each one of them, 80 cc's of Shut Your Trap Fin, which is now available at Ouya pharmacies. All 4 of them are taken into the throne room of parallels, because there are so many parallels. We've got Zelda throwbacks, Fable the Lost Chapter vibes. Oh god, 7 Deadly Sins now decides to join the party. How do I know this? I recognize 2 of the English dub actors. Jamieson Price, who voices the Holy Knight Grandmaster Dreyfus, is the king in this series. And the smartass with the bow is also the goat sin of lust Gother, who is voiced by none other than Eric Kimmier. At what point in our fill in the blank contract requires a triple callback in the first 10 minutes?
Off topic again. So after cold shouldering Naofumi hard, the king goes into a long exposition dump about the waves that are ending the world and how the heroes are the only one who can stop them.
It's alright, Mrs. Brody, he's fishing. He just got a couple of stripers. We'll bring him in for dinner. We won't be long. We haven't seen anything yet. Okay.
Afterwards, the king's attendant then chimes in with another expedition dump about how the legendary weapons and how they need to go on adventures in order to make themselves and their weapons stronger. And then they go back to their room with a third exposition dump about how all 4 of them came from alternate realities of different worlds themselves. That's 3 excessively talking-heavy exposition dumps in the span of 10 minutes. I'd say show don't tell, but to be fair, we've still got a lot of episode to go and a lot more story left to get through, so I suppose I'll give them some credit for streamlining it all, I guess.
Streamlining is a bit of an interesting word choice considering how many callbacks we've already have shoved down our throats. Zelda, Fable, 7 Deadly Sins, Spider-Man No Way Home. Now what? Status magic? Emeralds? Dude, this is just your Pokemon Nuzlocke series we've been working on for the last 6 months. Which I still have several episodes left to edit.
To be sure, let's compare general knowledge. Whose face is on the 1,000 yen bill? Ready and... Hidetaro Noguara. Wait, who?
So either the project manager has a lead foot on the story drive, or they're just a sadist for subjecting their audiences to nuclear level amounts of Expo Foreshadow reverse callback position. And guess what? We're only 11 minutes into this 40-minute episode. Hang on, I need a break. It's a good time for everyone to crash for the night to give themselves, and us viewers, just a moment to breathe before the next morning where, good God, our 4th exposition dump is already waiting. Our party members are told they now have to each build their own individual groups of adventurers for plot reasons, but the selection process leaves our otaku prince completely singled out. You remember that cold shoulder he got yesterday? Yeah, that's nothing compared to this one.
And why does he get singled out like this? It turns out that rumors have already started flying that the shield hero is incompetent because someone was listening in on their conversation about how shielders sucked in the games that the other 3 played. Which, can I say, is the most unrealistic thing I've ever heard in this anime, and there's still a lot of unrealistic shit in here. There is no way that a class with such an impregnable defense would go ignored by any self-respecting gamer out there, if not solely for the purpose of tilting the other player into submission. And the only way that's true is if everyone just collectively, gentlemen's agreement, chose not to play them out of respect. But I digress. Things seem pretty bleak for Naofumi since he can't fight on his own, but just then, one girl steps forward and offers to join him in his party. This girl's name is Mine, and that's about all I can say about her without losing my composure, so let's just move on.
I am so tempted to drop another trope bomb for the Hot but Hollow cliche, but things are moving so fast, I think we just have to pick our battles here.
Too many, Rick! Too many!
So the parties are assembled. Oh yeah, they can't work together because the status magic of their 4 legendary weapons conveniently jam the magic of each other whenever the weapons are in close physical proximity,
Man, I am really getting high-roaded today.
forcing them to split up with their own parties, except for the shield hero with the company of 1, who doesn't really seem to know what personal space is, by the way. And the way she constantly addresses him as Sir Hero says to me, red flags to the moon, do not under any conditions. After armor shopping with a blacksmith that I just know I've seen somewhere before, the two go out to get a bite to eat, and our hero passes down the side chick's repeated offers of wine, deciding that heroism fantasy fulfillment for our taco prince requires turning in early. Okay, seems like everything's worked out so far. Let's just keep it cool.
For about 5 seconds before everything suddenly goes to shit. Naofumi wakes up to find all his money, armor, and equipment gone, mine is nowhere to be found, and some castle guards show up out of nowhere and immediately arrest him. Turns out that 5th or some odd exposition dump we skipped over with mine telling us about how their kingdom is a matrilineal hierarchy wasn't just for show, and now she's here to accuse Naofumi of attempted rape, which is apparently the highest crime in this society. I'll swing back to this in the final review.
It's safe to say that Naofumi and the audience are both thrown for a loop by this facade accusation, empowered by a mob that has taken only 2 seconds to declare our protagonist permanently and irrefutably guilty, without a single shred of real proof, no testimony, nor anything about a tiny little legal detail that's often overlooked called due process. Even in this fictional setting, I really hope that a manipulative bitch and her spear-wielding dickbag co-conspirator get eaten alive by angels or titans. I don't care which. I just hope it happens very, very slowly. And to literal great hell with the other 2 punks that claim to know everything about everything, yet neither one has taken a moment's critical thought to realize something's really off. But no. Our shield hero is now pinned against a witch hunt, I meant what I said and I ain't taking it back, against a mob running entirely on self-righteous panic. And just for a moment, it looks like Naofumi is actually going to start dropping bodies, even as the king is repeatedly threatening him with execution. But even in the end, the king still won't, because even this supposed predator in the court is still one of our heroes, and he won't take action against him because they need their heroes for political clout. Wow.
That's the read you got from that?
You did say we're on a time crunch, and my full thoughts on this would probably get us into a much deeper rabbit hole than we have time for today.
I mean, yeah, but it's very clear that the king here is just as much of a dick as anyone else in the room, if not more so. He makes this very clear when he declares that Naofumi will basically never have a decent life anywhere in his kingdom by casting him aside and forcing him to fight the waves on his own. It doesn't take a professional political scientist to see that he's clearly trying to set him up for failure, to humiliate him even further and have him die in battle so that he doesn't have to get his own hands dirty.
And so goes his banishment. A fake accusation on his back, listing him as a dead man walking, stripped of almost all of his personal possessions and any chance of social recovery, being paraded around as a political toy with a simultaneous piss off and go die sentence, and left with nothing but a shield and a lifetime of rifle rage to storm off into town to either get the hell out of Dodge or kill every single person that either set him up or refused to stand up for the truth. Now that is how you set up an episode! Internal and external stakes, true intensity, real world parallels that totally don't exist, believable motivation! Well done, episode 1!
I will say that I am impressed that this series is willing to go so far away from the standard tropes of the isekai genre, making the world so hostile to their so-called hero that they themselves summoned. It's a refreshing change of pace from so many bog-standard stories half-assedly trying to cash in on the booming genre and essentially making the same story over and over again.
I will totally drink to that. 10 out of 10, right out of the gate. Conflicts, stakes, more complications, more internal conflict, motivation and emotion. That kind of goes right over the head of most anime writers, and most writers, period. So all Naofumi has left is being used as a free punching bag by everyone around him, harassed by creeps he has no interest in, only angry tennis balls to take his rage out on, which he uses in turn to take it out on marketeers trying to rip off the village outcast. Really, I'm astonished at this point he hasn't killed anybody yet, despite the fact that killing him would make him look even more guilty, I know. But all this tension, as PT said, is a solid departure from the norm, and it works. But there's one thing I really don't get. When he runs into this penguin-looking pawnbroker-looking creep in the back alley, who he soon finds out is a slave trader, why isn't the immediate response to chop him into 1,000,000 pieces and feed him to the scavenger birds? And that's episode 1. 1, I tell you. If you still have your brain cells left intact, it's time for...
So now we start the finale out on the high seas of all places, where we're introduced to what looks to be the Queen overseeing the battle against the waves in progress, while also having complete trust and faith in Naofumi and his party to finish the battle. Well, that was a casual turnaround. We went from Naofumi being an outcast despised by all for a crime he didn't commit, to being revered as the hero he was told he was from the start? I know this is the whole point of this review, but the whiplash between these two states is... it's really something, I gotta say.
Okay, I need to apologize for being out of line in this format by just jumping to conclusions, but this filling in the blank is a lot more straightforward. Because this episode is almost entirely empty. The last episode is so bland and empty of motivation, I don't even know how it left the floor of the cutting room. But here are the few things I noticed.
Naofumi is fighting his Asian female hero counterpart, who claims that she's trying to save her own world, complete with her own random tag team of supporting characters, who both they and Naofumi's backup crew don't seem to do anything of consequence in the entire sequence.
At least we get to see the shield hero has obviously evolved his shield's abilities into 10 different forms, and also shows that he's a Skyrim fan, and 1, definitely knows his shouts, and 2, he's possibly a 4 times legendary status upgrade to heavy armor and or destruction magic.
Eventually, Naofumi notices a chink in Glass's armor when she shows a weakness to his Soul Eater shield and challenges her to a one-on-one fight aboard a sinking shipwreck. After having her effectively beaten, she then challenges his position as a hero, causing him to question if this world was really fighting for, suggesting that he had never once considered such a question up until now, despite how horribly it's treated him thus far, but suspension of disbelief.
Trope alert number 4? No, 3. Naofumi turns his shield into whatever this world's version of a berserker forbidden power fall to the dark side item that he gets this close to using before the plot pulls him out of it, and her weakness is wine. From an Irish German, that's just sad.
On a side note, I just want to point out how this girl came into the scene, as she was just found nearly drowned clutching a barrel when the Queen suddenly gets an idea with no further context. I mean, if you saw the start of this battle, you'd see it coming, but without that information, this just looks random as hell.
All I managed to get from that little exchange was, when Glass loses the battle and barely survives, her teammates intervene and actually makes a smart decision to fight another day. So when all the noise dies down, now we have trope number 4, which also happens to be an alarmingly large nail in this adaptation's coffin. The whole battle just ends without any meaningful explanation, not even a half-assed montage of what the impact was on anyone. And that includes the other 3 heroes that sat around wounded and done nothing of value whatsoever. And unfortunately, the manipulative from episode 1 is disappointingly alive and well.
I'm not gonna explain why that's so funny, but you kinda hit the nail on the head a bit there.
Noted. So yeah, the flat filler crowds are the best of what we get. I mean, besides another Fable Lost chapter callback with fighting mustaches.
That's a good little fishy.
And a very brief moment of the raccoon ear girl Raftalia rescued from captivity, asking the proverbial, what comes next? Trope number 5 if you're keeping score. This is followed by another lack of any explanation to the next decision.
But that will have to wait for another time, because Return of Drowning Girl! Seriously, can this chick go 5 minutes without getting herself into trouble? Well, it turns out that this time she was actually trying to kill herself here, but was just pathetically bad at it. Evidently, this girl, Rishia, was a member of Itsuki the Bow Hero's party when her fellow party members accused her of breaking a favorite accessory of Itsuki's, and he subsequently kicked her out of the club. Apparently, false accusations for getting too much attention are just the norm for this world.
You're kidding me, right? Between these other three heroes, the asinine level of corruption in the courts, and their apparent complete lack of a justice system, I wouldn't go within a dozen parsecs of the political aspects of this world. And here's trope number 6, the delicate female co-star hanging on every word of the protagonist as they return to a site of early destruction. However, I do have to give points to the villagers who have a very 2020 attitude of rebuilding their entire place and just moving along with life as if there's no giant collective trauma they've all just endured. But then the shield hero drops the bomb. He just cashed in a very big favor with the queen so he can be named the regional lord of this village, which now comes complete with a snarky but very efficient librarian, enough raw muscle to rebuild their entire village from the ground up, and the resources so it can better protect itself in the future. Oh, for trope number 7! You're leaving us? Oh my god!
Yeah, this has certainly been done before, but it does give us a bit more of a look at the relationship between Naofumi and Raftalia. It shows that they really do care for each other, so much so that they're willing to give up on their past lives in order to be there for one another, followed by a happy reunion with the new surrogate family they find themselves surrounded by. And none of it means a goddamn thing. Look, I get that this is a big scene and that it's a good conclusion to Naofumi's character arc, but without the context of everything that came before it, the emotion just doesn't stick to us at all. I get that I should be saving this for the review, but nothing that happens after the battle means anything without the knowledge or emotional connection to all these characters we've never...
Hang on. Look. What? Look, I don't mean to disrupt your entire format, make the whole thing go off the rails, but based on how little information that we had in the last episode, I think we have enough information overall to make a guess of whether or not the series fills in the blank. So, do you mind if I take a premature roll for initiative? Where are my dice?
Alright, go ahead. Let's see what you got.
Actually, where are my dice? Oh crap, I didn't think about for recording.
Okay, we're here at last. In the name of anime, in the name of reasonable pursuit of trope negation, and in the name of common good of pushing the envelope of creative writing, I must be brief about what happened during the middle episodes. Pretty much nothing. Look, don't get me wrong, the first episode was wild, but in extreme disappointing contrast, I was bored in the last episode. I don't know all of the behind the scenes stuff that had anything to do with it, but nothing in the last episode was even in the same galactic supercluster of episode 1's energy. The middle episodes are what I can only assume is reality TV, slowly dying a painful death. The other 3 heroes did next to nothing for even basic plot advancement, and the manipulative played by Amber Heard never ever saw her 200 cc's of karma delivered.
That night you were assaulted by Naofumi, but you escaped and came to me for help. Isn't that right?
Yes, that's right! I was so scared and you were the only person I could turn to!
That was a lie too?
Besides reducing herself to arm candy of another male figure, how long is it going to be before he gets a Naofumi treatment? Another point I'd like to make. Ashura forgive us, but calling the other 2 heroes flat plot devices might actually be a compliment compared to how much of nothing we've heard from either 2 of them since the first episode. Even our main protagonist, besides the obvious XP gained from grinding wave after wave, from what I can tell at least, he hasn't really gained anything in the visible character development. I mean, I can't really read much from just bland expressions in the entire last episode. Okay, fine, there's one obvious bit of plot here. Obviously, he has picked up random characters that must mirror or complement his personality type for trope purposes, including the side chick Raftalia, who he must have broken her out of captivity, and she must have found her own sense of self, such as it is, and Naofumi better have liberated everyone else in captivity, considering he has not killed or even wounded or even hurt the slave trader at all. But if history is anything to go by, the local authority is probably in on it at many levels. But besides all that, nothing else was really there. Or if there was much more plot to it than that, then it was either resolved way too early, or worse, withered out in value until the same overall thing happened. Nothing worth paying attention to remained in the finale, and I didn't hear anything of a larger meta arc mentioned more than once during the Conflict of Conscience moment in Naofumi's final battle. I really don't mean to be harsh, but by my count, I have 6 random callbacks, 5 exposition dumps, and 7 major trope alerts in just 2 episodes. All of this equals I don't even have half of the motivation for that wild ass guest segment that I did back in Fill in the Blank number 1.
I mean, you're not wrong, but this is also kind of the whole point of the show, so props to you for holding out until episode 3 before it all came out. Well, I guess it's up to me to give the final review on whether or not this series fills in the blank. Short answer, no, not even close, but to its credit, it wasn't for lack of trying. Something which I never noticed until I was rewatching this for the review is that the first episode is twice as long as the rest of the series. Episode 1 is 42 minutes long, while every other episode is only the standard 21. Looking back, I can kind of see why I never noticed it before. There is just so much stuff going on in this episode that there's no way that your brain can process all the information by the time you realize that nearly an hour of your life is already gone. We get an intro to our protagonist, a look into the world, the waves, the legendary weapons, the stigma against the shield, the grinding, the matrilineal hierarchy, the accusation, the fallout, the struggle to climb back up. It just keeps on going. However, as thorough as it is, it's still nowhere near enough to get the full scope of the story in just one episode. So much so that the introduction to the real main heroine is left as a literal 5-second cameo at the ass end of the episode. Raphtalia's story is one of the most striking parts of the series, and we only get a brief image of her as a child, going straight to her suddenly grown up and devoted wholly to Naofumi for reasons we can only guess at. Of course, that's still more than we get out of the rest of his party, as we know absolutely nothing about Philo and Melty, or even Queen Morelia, the latter of which is also emblematic of another major facet we miss out on, Naofumi's redemption. We watch Naofumi get the piss beaten out of him in every conceivable way, and suddenly that's all resolved and over with by the time we catch up with him for the finale? How the heck did that happen? And of course, I can't talk about the Rising of the Shield Hero without bringing up the major controversies surrounding this series. I've not brought them up in any significant way up until now, since this can of worms has the potential to be a bit of an episode-hogging tangent. And at the end of the day, that's not what we're supposed to be doing here. For all 2 of you unaware, this anime has a reputation for pushing themes of slavery apologism and anti-feminist fear-mongering propaganda. Remind me, how is this stuff for kids again? I'm afraid I'm gonna have to bow out of passing judgment on this, since this isn't my job as a narrative reviewer, and I feel like this sort of thing is best served for a critical think piece dedicated to such a discussion. I'll tell you what, if we can get over 100 likes on this episode, I'll make a dedicated deep dive on this topic if you really want to hear my thoughts on this. That being said, I do have to point out that these topics come off as much, much worse without the middle episode that alleviate or at least address these concerns. So these problematic elements are just yet another failure to fill in the blank. So yeah, all the stuff set up in the first episode got resolved before the finale, everything in the finale didn't get introduced until after the first episode, and problematic elements were exacerbated by a lack of explanation that happened in the middle. All in all, this is a failing grade to fill in the blank for this series in just about every sense of the word. Final thoughts. I hope you don't think that these last couple of minutes mean that we don't actually like the show. We did mean everything we said earlier when we were praising this series. The sheer visceral emotion that the first episode elicits alone, along with its open defiance of conventional tropes, was more than enough to make a fan out of me with this series. It's just that this story doesn't exactly lend itself well to the format of this particular show. Everything that the show had been building up, it was pretty much wrapped up neatly by episode 21, to the point that the overarching thread of the waves was pretty much all the show had to go on to extend to the finale. And when you skip over all of that conclusion, the end result is that all the build-up and emotional connection that the first episode created just kind of fizzles out with no real payoff. Again, it's not exactly something that should be held against this series outside of the confines of this show in particular. As of writing and recording this, Season 2 is still a few weeks away, though given our track record, it's probably out and done with by the time this comes out. But until then, all we can do is just hope that the next season can continue the same level of quality with hopefully a little bit less of the more questionable elements in them.
I don't mean to be harsh, and I know I'm missing all the context in the middle episodes, but if we're comparing the first and last episodes to, say, types of metal, the first episode was tamahagami, the metal that's used in real katanas, the best. But by the end of the series, the metal was so crap it wasn't even good enough for knives and forks. So, what the hell? There's no logic or reasoning behind that pitfall of disappointment. And as a professional artist and amateur writer, sorry, I know I'm missing a lot of context, but I have to give this season just overall a complete flop with how disconnected the bookends were. And there are so many other animated productions with great storylines that I would be doing an irreparable offense to if I were too lenient with this series. Now, if you'll excuse me, I actually have some substantive story development to do on your part, which includes several more episodes of Emerald Nuzlocke, Fill in the Blank number 3, and Fill in the Blank number 4 coming up next, and something special in the future. So, toodles!
Well, nothing like a good old case of premature ejection to finish us off. Thank you guys so much for watching. Be sure to check out the other episodes in the playlist, and we'll see you later.